Okay, so today we're gonna take a look at my RTX 38 no 3080 Ti. I'm actually gonna take it apart and trying to see what is wrong with it, and maybe hoping to fix it. But yeah, you know. So what happens is I left my computer on overnight, and it turns out that in the morning when I check it, all the fans were running at full speed, and nothing was on the screen, and it was not responsive. So I ended up taking it apart. Well, not taking it apart completely, but unplugged the power, reseated the GPU, let it sit for a few minutes. Trying it again, didn't work, and then let it sit for about half a day, and then it eventually came back, and then it kind of went out again. Well, not went out, but the fan for some reason just kicked in at full speed on the GPU, and I was still able to see things, so I shut it off. I was like, I shouldn't be hearing the GPU fan at full speed. So anyways, it turns out that I think there was something wrong with it. So I opened up the case and put my hands on the GPU, and then it got pretty hot. And so, and I think I start to smell something like weird, like almost like electrical, not fire, but something burned electrically. So anyway, so I took it apart and got the GPU out, and this was like actually I literally took it out after running for about a minute or two. To boot it up, and then I was trying to log in after putting in my password. It just went blank, and I ended up shutting off, and I put my hands on the GPU, and it was kind of hot. So anyway, so what I have here is basically the GPU that's out of the case. I'm trying to unscrew all the screws that I can see. I think my original thought was that I can just take all the screws out on the back and something will just open. Apparently that's not the case. So obviously there's adhesives, not really adhesive, but there's paddings, there's thermal pads, and there's thermal compounds that is actually holding it in place. It turns out I did have all the right screws out in the first time around, and I was not able to see or figure out right away how this thing opens up. And so I just, as you can see, flipping around, and I saw a screw there. I'm like, oh, well, there's more screws there, so that probably is holding. So I couldn't figure out whether the back plate is fixed on the main circuit board, or something is still connected or screwed onto the heatsink with the top cover. So I ended up putting 4 screws back on, trying to figure out, like, okay, maybe I took out too many screws. Now this I didn't look up. I've seen some videos of people taking GPUs apart and trying to add water coolings, and I'm obviously not going through that far, but I was trying to at least open it up and see, what was making that smell. Hopefully I can get a visual inspection. So what I was doing was I was just looking, like, how many screws are there to actually, hold all these freaking pieces together, right? And so I'm trying to wiggle things apart, and I took one screw out that was holding, I believe, the actual back plate on the back plate on the main circuit board, right? Now the metal piece that's on the flat metal piece on the back of it. And then I was like, well, I know there's fan there, and there's fan connectors. I was trying to figure out how to pop that open, and I didn't want to damage the connector. So again, looking around, I'm like, maybe something underneath the fan. I can take the PCI cover off, right? So now I can start like wiggle things a little bit, and it feels like it's moving, but I couldn't really tell, right? I was like, there's got to be something that is still holding it together. Looking around and around, and I think I eventually found even more screws. Now, long story short, Okay, so at this point, I figure that the 4 screws that's holding the heatsink, it's not really holding the back plate. I mean, it kind of is, but it's really just holding the heatsink on top of the chipset. So ended up taking that off, and other that I can actually start wiggling a little bit more. And I think I start almost like trying to peel it off. All right, I can see that it separates a little bit there. Yep, see, but it didn't really give that much. So I thought there was something still holding it in place. And so even after that screw was removed, I'm looking around and see if there's any actually anything inside of the the fan shroud that is that may have screws underneath it that holds onto the heatsink. So I ended up taking 3 screws out of the first fan, right, trying to see if there's anything underneath it. And the result was no, there was nothing underneath it other than just the bracket that holds the fan in place. Yeah, I was confused on how this was actually staying together. So then I think I ended up looking around. I think one of the things that I ended up doing was looking at this plastic cover on top is attached to the heatsink. And I was thinking, well, maybe the plastic top can come off, right? And there's a screw there that's kind of hold the back plates in place. And then I was looking in between the heatsink and the plastic cover and trying to figure out if there's anything that's holding it together, other than the screws that I've taken out, right? And I think eventually I know that it's wiggling. It's not doing much. And I keep on thinking like something is still holding it in place, right? Like maybe I'm missing a screw or two. And I tried to pry it open, but obviously at that point I didn't want to actually break anything. I want to just kind of open it and see, what might have been causing the issue. So I see these little screws, like things that'll hold screws on the other side. So that is really the screws that are holding the circuit board onto the back metal plate. And it can't really you can't really remove it without removing the top. And so that really was designed to be fastened from the inside, right? And so I ended up seeing a screw that's underneath right at the end of that PCI Express thing there at the end of it. And then I was looking at the other side and I was like, oh, there's another one. And again, as you can see, the screwdriver doesn't really fit in there, and I was not able to really try to unscrew it properly, right? And so one screw came out. I think I ended up taking another one out somewhere. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I know I was looking, so that this is just the part where I'm looking like there's gotta be another screw, right? So I then think, oh wow, maybe the I/O plate is somehow holding things together. And so I ended up taking it apart. So there's 2 screws on the bottom that connects it to the motherboard or to the circuit board. And then there's a bunch of screws that I already taken out. And so this part is the thing that I like to do is putting some screws back onto the plate where they're supposed to go. The reason for that is that I sometimes open things up and tend to forget where the screw came from. And this way, they go right back where they started, and I won't lose them, and I also will remember where that come from, where the screws came from. So that was something that I've learned from taking things apart many times, to if I can at least put the screw back onto a certain part where the screw came from, at least I won't lose it, and I always remember where they go. So now I'm looking closely. I think at some point I figured I got all the screws, right? The top's got to come off. And I think I wouldn't call it brute forced it, but it was definitely done a lot of wiggling. I think there's another screw that I ended up taking out from there. And again, this screw right here, taken out was useless. That didn't really do anything. And I think I ended up putting a lot of that back before I actually fully separate the heatsink fan piece from the circuit board. So yeah, again, still looking. This thing is built quite nicely, and it's big. So it's kind of heavy, and that's why I thought, like, well, something that's heavy, must be screws and stuff that's holding it in place. Still looking on the inside, trying to figure out where the heck is actually going to separate. And it's kind of hard to see where things were fastened on the inside, and you know, the way that the top cover was designed is to actually cover up a lot of these things on the inside, and you know, for obvious reasons, to, you know, have better airflows and to you know, make it look nice, right? And so now here you can see I'm just starting to trying to pull things and trying to figure out. I think I figured out that is just the thing that's holding it in place is really just there's like a putty, like a thermo putty that was used on the memory chips. Yep, there it goes. And then it pops open actually quite easily, surprisingly. And then okay, so now that I'm working on trying to get the fan connector off. This one is a pain in the butt. I didn't want to pull on it too hard, you know, I didn't want to break the connector or the cable, and so I ended up trying different screwdriver bits to prop the inside, or, you know, to basically try to pry it out. I think I didn't damage the connector, but I did scratch it a little bit, but it eventually came out. And I think one of the things is that the clip on it was so tight that I was not able to just, you know, make it release very easily. And so I think the socket that it was in actually moved a little bit. I mean, I ended up pushing it back, but it was in there pretty snugly, and it was just really hard getting it out. Eventually I got it out. Surprisingly, the connectors on the other side for the other two fans were very easy to disconnect, and once that happens, I was able to see the inside and the chipsets and the memories and all that stuff. And here, even though, you know, I didn't, you know, specifically try to smell anything, but while I was working on this, I could definitely smell things were burnt. And so, yeah, again, this connector was really, really hard to disconnect. And eventually I did disconnect it. I didn't like how tight that was. So, yeah. And I also didn't want to hurt myself. I've in the past, I've tried to, you know, open things up and trying to, you know, disconnect things, and ended up using screwdrivers and, you know, trying to pull it hard enough, or, you know, whatever, and ended up slicing through my fingers. And it just the other day I was working on my mailbox, and I tried to put a 2x4 in the ground, right? And I was trying to cut the piece using a miter saw, and the splinter ended up cutting my hand. It's kind of clumsy, I guess, in that sense. And so I know that I get hurt, scratched, cut all the time. And so anyway, so I was really trying not to do that. And as you can see, it finally opened. And then, you know, working on the other two the other two. I have to say, looking at the circuit board, right, and I think this is actually this particular board from Gigabyte, with the 3080 Ti. I really like the way it looks. I know that, so eventually I'll talk about the end result of this board. But I really like the way it looks. You know, it feels like it's bigger than the Founders Edition, or the reference board. Like it just seems like it's a little bit longer. I've seen some of the images of the reference board inside of the Founders Edition. They're not as long. And so the fans that they have in there, you know, obviously there's one that's blown cool air right onto the chipset, and then there's another one that, you know, trying to clean off or cool off the heatsink that's attached to it at the end. So this one, 30 fans is, you know, obviously cooling a lot more things, but so the way that it's laid out is very, you know, symmetrical and looks kind of cool. Yeah, that connector on the top for that one fan was pain in the butt. So now that it's open, and I'm going, you know, find a microfiber towel. The thermal paste on this was pretty dry, so I was thinking like, oh, maybe it was just overheating, and, you know, causing it to heat up really fast, and so I ended up cleaning it off and then reapplying the paste. I didn't really reapply the putty or the thermal strip for memories and, you know, other power, I guess power regulator or whatever they're called. So, you know, clean up the heatsink here. All those things that are on there has been on there, and I didn't change any of that stuff. The only thing that I did was, as you can see on the left hand side there, the paste came off. The corner of that paste came off, so I ended up just prying it up and put it back together. And so I think I ended up putting some of the screws back on while it's open. They really didn't need to have them off in the first place. So I think that black stuff right there on the copper heatsink is for the memory, and it you know, coolings and all that stuff, I think is for memory. I'm not a you know, double E major or anything, so I really don't know too much about these things. I believe they're memories. They look like memory chips to me. So then everything else with the white thermal strip that is you know, cooling the whatever the rest of the components off. And so what I was doing, as you can see here, that there's a corner of it that kind of came off and ended up peeling it off and then reattached to that corner there. One of the things that I was thinking is like, oh, well, I didn't want it to, you know, take it off completely and reshape it or whatever. So I ended up just squeezing it, like all of them, squeezing it together a little bit so that they have more height to them. So the hope is that when I reapply this onto the circuit board, because now the thickness of this putty is thicker than when it was taken off, it hopefully have better contact on the chips, so that, you know, like, because the thing is this, right, when it came out of the factory, these don't have that indentations of each of the chipset. So then when they press or they tighten the screw of the heatsink on, you know, onto the main chipset and the memory, they get pressed, right? And so then they get pressed into the shape of the chipset. And so that's what happened here. It is that you can see there's squares and stuff there and edges. So what I ended up doing is I pushing together, make them a little bit thicker in the middle. So when I hopefully reapply this or reassemble this thing back together, I have a little bit more thickness on the putty, so that when I tighten the screws or the back plate onto the heatsink, it has better contact on the memory. So at least that's the thought, right? And I was originally thinking like, oh, maybe I can even put thermal paste on it. I didn't want to go through that thing and then, you know, most likely it won't work. So so yeah, so I think at some point I was actually trying to clean. There's a if you look at the top of this the circuit board, right in the middle, there's a bunch of little like square black dots, black squares. I think, and there's some on the in the middle of this board, or more on the left of the board. I'm smelling it. I'm trying to figure out where the burning smell was coming from. It was definitely coming from the left hand side, that those little black dots, black squares there, and there's also more on the right hand side, right next to the connectors. But most of the smell were coming from the left hand side, and so, but looking at it closely, I didn't see anything that was burnt or damaged. Again, it just smells like some electrical burning. And so I thought like, oh, maybe it just overheated and then they didn't really have good contact or whatever. But the back of my mind is thinking like this card is probably fried. And so eventually that was the conclusion that I had, was that the card was fried. And yeah, and we know at some point I'll know why. So I kind of the old school, way of putting thermal paste on. Nowadays I've seen again YouTube videos of people putting thermal paste on multiple ways. I think the circular dot in the middle is probably the best, or the cross. They tend to have a decent coverage with pressure, but I always like to spread the thermal paste as much as I can, or as evenly as I can. So when the two contact surfaces press together, there's always something there to make the contact and hopefully seal the two surfaces together, versus allowing bubbles and gaps in between. So that's what I'm doing there, and I'm actually putting fairly, I wouldn't say thick, but decent amount of thermal paste on there, hoping to have good contact. And then I think I dabbed a little bit on the heatsink side as well once it's there. So this is very old school. A lot of PC builders don't even do that for CPUs. They just basically, squeeze a whole bunch onto the thing. And the good thing about a lot of these newer thermal pastes is that they're not conductive, so you don't have to worry about putting way too much, right? And so they kind of overflow and it gets squeezed out of the side and they're touching electronics and whatnot. So yeah, so some of these don't actually do that. So now I'm trying to figure out how to put this back together. I think eventually I figured out I just need to have these things obviously reassembled so things don't just move around, but also trying to put it back however that I took it apart. So I think I ended up connecting the two fan connectors in the according to this orientation is on top right now. I think it's on top. Anyways, the two connectors first, and then actually it's on the bottom. Never mind. So yeah, as you can see, I was trying to figure out the orientation. I think I ended up. Oh yeah, putting more thermal paste. Kind of a waste at this point, I think. Anyways, so the actual result of all of this is that the GPU is pretty much fried. I was not able to reuse it or fix it. And again, I was smelling it. I could tell that was definitely smelling pretty bad. Trying to line everything up, and again, eventually, I think just connecting the two connectors on the bottom first, because that was a lot easier, and then connect the single one on top. Once they clip in place, it's my head is in the way. I think I may need to adjust my camera at some point to face forward a little bit. It seems like my face is in the shots a lot of times. Yeah, it's kind of hard to have a good angle maybe I'll have lower the camera angle, lower the camera height a little bit. So, but anyways, so yeah, the single one goes back in. They go on pretty easily, right? And once that's on, I think I was able to just line up, put the holes on the back, and then screw it back on. So, anyways, so once that's pressed down, screws go back in, the plates go back in. There's really not that much that I think I want to go over any further. I basically reassemble the thing back together and test it out. And so I think what the so I reinstalled the GPU once once this is reassembled. I reinstalled it, powered on. The machine won't even power on at that point. The light goes on from the CPU AIO. If I remember correctly, I think my memory RGB weren't even on. I see flashes on some of these lights. So there's no video. The machine don't turn on. Fans don't turn on. It doesn't really do anything. And so at that point, I'm pretty sure that the GPU is dead. And so I ended up replacing this 3080 Ti with a new 4070 Ti. Now, the two models have the same memory, and I'll have another video of that. Well, I'll do a comparison. It's actually surprisingly how big of a difference they are. So we'll talk a little bit more in the other video of the GPU replacement. So here I'm just trying to reassemble everything back together. And again, the result is this thing's dead. So I can probably just shut up and maybe let you watch the rest of this, but it's kind of pointless. So I fully understand if you don't finish the video. So, but anyways.